Autumn leaves crunched beneath Daniel's boots as he walked home from the train station. It was late October, and the crisp air carried the faint scent of wood smoke. He'd been away for 3 days on a business trip to Chicago, a routine audit that dragged longer than expected. His mind buzzed with numbers and spreadsheets, but his heart tugged toward home, toward Emily, his wife of 7 years. They built a quiet life in their suburban Massachusetts home, a sanctuary of routine and comfort. Or so he thought. Before we jump in, real quick, most of you who enjoy these videos still haven't subscribed. If you're one of them, please take a second to hit that button. It helps with channel growth so much and means more than you know. And if you're already subscribed, thank you. Now, let's begin. Emily greeted him at the door with her usual warmth, her auburn hair catching the glow of the hallway light. "Missed you," she said, kissing his cheek, her lips soft and familiar. She wore a loose sweater, the kind she favored on chilly evenings, and her hazel eyes sparkled with something Daniel couldn't quite place. Relief, perhaps. He shrugged off the odd twinge in his chest and dropped his suitcase by the stairs. Dinner was simple: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, a glass of red wine. They talked about his trip, her week at the library where she worked, and the stray cat she'd started feeding on the porch. It was ordinary, comforting, the kind of night that made Daniel grateful for their steady rhythm. But as they cleared the plates, Emily's phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it, then quickly turned it face down, her fingers lingering a moment too long. "Who's that?" Daniel asked, casual but curious. "Just Sarah," she said, too quickly. "She's asking about book club." Sarah was her coworker, a chatterbox who loved hosting wine-soaked evenings. Daniel nodded, but the twinge returned, sharper this time. At night, he couldn't sleep. The house creaked in the wind, and Emily's breathing beside him was uneven, restless. Around 2 a.m., her phone lit up on the nightstand. Daniel, half awake, saw the name flash across the screen. Alex. No last name, just Alex. His stomach twisted. Emily stirred, grabbed the phone, and slipped out of bed, padding downstairs. He waited, ears straining, until he heard the faint murmur of her voice through the floorboards. Next morning, she was all smiles, brewing coffee and humming a tune he didn't recognize. Daniel didn't mention the call. Instead, he watched her, how she avoided his gaze when he asked about her plans, how her hands trembled slightly as she poured cream. He told himself it was nothing, paranoia from a sleepless night, but doubt had taken root. Days turned into weeks, and the signs piled up like fallen leaves. A receipt for a coffee shop Daniel didn't know she frequented, a new perfume he hadn't bought her, a late-night errand that stretched into hours. He wanted to confront her, but fear held him back, fear of shattering their fragile peace, fear of being wrong. Or worse, right. One evening, Emily said she was meeting Sarah for drinks. Daniel kissed her goodbye, then waited 10 minutes before grabbing his keys. He drove to the bar she'd named, a cozy spot called the Lantern. Her car wasn't there. He circled the lot, then the surrounding streets, his pulse quickening. On a whim, he headed toward the riverfront, a quieter part of town with boutique hotels and dim-lit restaurants. That's when he saw it, her silver Honda parked outside the Willow Inn, a quaint bed and breakfast they once stayed at for their anniversary. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. He parked across the street, watching the ivy-draped entrance. Minutes later, Emily emerged, laughing, her arm linked with a man. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a confident stride. They paused under a street lamp, and she leaned into him, her lips brushing his in a way that made Daniel's chest cave in. He didn't storm over, didn't scream. He drove home, numb, and waited. When Emily returned at midnight, smelling faintly of lavender and gin, she slid into bed beside him, oblivious to his silence. "Good night," he asked, voice steady. "Great," she murmured, already drifting off. "Sarah says hi." The lie burned, But Daniel said nothing. Instead, he began to plan. Didn't want a divorce. Didn't want to lose her. What he wanted was answers why she'd strayed, who this man was, how deep it went. So he turned their home into a quiet battlefield. He installed a tracking app on her phone during a moment of distraction, synced it to his laptop. He hid a voice recorder in her purse, a tiny thing he'd bought online. He became a ghost in his own life, watching, listening, piecing together her secret world. The tracker led him to Alex's apartment, a sleek loft downtown. The recorder caught fragments, whispers of "I can't leave him yet," laughter, the clink of glasses. Alex was a photographer, a freelancer who'd met Emily at a library exhibit months ago. Their affair had started small, a coffee here, a lunch there, until it spiraled into stolen nights and reckless promises. The deeper Daniel dug, the stranger it got. Alex wasn't just a lover. He was a collector of stories, of lives. The recorder picked up a conversation one night that chilled Daniel to the bone. "You're my muse," Alex said, his voice low and reverent. "This project, it's all for you, for us." Emily giggled, then asked, "What happens when it's done?" Alex's reply was cryptic. "We'll be immortal." Daniel scoured the web for Alex's work. He found a portfolio, stunning, haunting portraits of women, each with a story captioned beneath. Leela, who danced until dawn. Clara, who burned her past. The photos were beautiful, but the women's eyes held a quiet despair. And then, buried in a blog post, a hint. Alex was working on a book, a visual memoir of love and betrayal, funded by a shadowy grant. Daniel's gut churned. Was Emily just another chapter? He confronted her on a rainy Friday, the recorder's evidence laid out on the kitchen table. She stared at it, pale, then broke. "It's not what you think," she sobbed. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." She admitted the affair, but swore it was ending. Alex had grown possessive, strange. She'd wanted excitement, a spark their marriage had lost, but now she was scared. "Then why stay with him?" Daniel demanded. "I didn't know how to stop," she whispered. "He has things, photos. He said he'd ruin me." Daniel's anger shifted. Alex wasn't just a rival, he was a predator. Over the next week, he tracked Alex's movements, learned his routines. One night, he followed him to a warehouse studio, slipping inside behind him. The space was a shrine, walls plastered with photos of Emily, some candid, some staged, all captioned with fragments of her life. A manuscript sat on a desk, titled Echoes of Her Shadow. Daniel's name was in it, their marriage dissected like a specimen. He didn't hesitate. He doused the room with kerosene from a can in his trunk, struck a match, and watched it burn. The fire devoured Alex's obsession, leaving only ash. When police questioned him later, he played dumb, wrong place, wrong time. Emily backed his story, too shaken to argue. They didn't divorce. They rebuilt, slowly, brick by brick. Emily quit the library, started therapy. Daniel forgave her, though the trust was a fragile thing. Sometimes, late at night, he'd catch her staring out the window, as if waiting for a shadow that never came. And he wondered, had he saved her, or simply rewritten her story?